Hey, friends. Welcome to Dishing on Divorce Next Chapter on WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, Podcasts, and TV, and Going Bold Radio. I'm your host, Lisa Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. I'm also a divorced mom of 3 now grown kids, a former lawyer, a current divorce coach, an educator, and a spiritual counselor who is committed to transforming the divorce experience for everyone involved. My goal is to share the power of divorce coaching with people who need it most. People like you who are going through divorce, thinking about divorce, or just finished with their divorce process and are wondering how are they going to navigate life as an unmarried person. Divorce coaching is relatively new to the divorce support professional field, but it's a game changer. As your divorce coach, I'm like your primary care physician. I look at you, the whole person, and I help you discover who you are and who you want to be, where you need the support first, and who you need to find to get you that support. I help you rediscover your own strength so that you can make the decisions that are right for you. You, not your neighbor, not your sister, not your friend, but you. Your situation is unique and has unique needs, and you're the expert in your life. I help you remember that when you're feeling the most loss in your process. One of the issues we don't always think about during the divorce process is our future elder care needs, and perhaps the special needs of different members of our family who may or may not be in our immediate circle. Today, we'll be speaking with my friend Shana Siegel. She is a lawyer and an expert in all things elder care. She is a partner and chair of the Elder Law and Special Needs Group at Norris McLaughlin. And actually, her bio has very tiny print. So I am going to ask her to give us her background and all of her details. Shana, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to spend this time with you.
Oh, I'm so glad you were able to join us today. Shana, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into this field?
Absolutely. So in college, I had a real interest in healthcare policy issues. And so I decided to go work for AARP in Washington, D.C. And it was about that time that the nursing home reform regulations were coming out. As previously in nursing homes, a lot of bad things were happening. So there were a lot of reforms that came into existence, and I was involved in that process in lobbying for seniors. So I've had a real interest in this for a long time. And then when I graduated law school, I started working with seniors and their families and advocating for them dealing with aging, illness, and disability issues. The other population that I work with is individuals with a disability. So sometimes that's families who have a young child with a disability. Sometimes it's individuals who become disabled later in life, people with mental health issues. So the issues that all of those individuals and families face are similar in that they're dealing with healthcare system, they're dealing with public benefits, and they're dealing with estate planning and long-term care planning issues. So that's kind of what I do.
So you mentioned a few things that really hit triggers with me. Mm-hmm. And one of them was the very first thing you mentioned, which is that after college, you went and you worked for AARP. So I just want to share that when I turned 50, I got my first letter from AARP and I threw it in the garbage because I was so upset that I was being acknowledged or recognized as a person who could be in that category of people. And I think when we're going through divorce, no matter how old we are, we're in denial about certain aspects of our life. And we may forget things because we're in denial. So how can we remind people that A, there's no shame in being older, and B, let's plan for it so that we don't have to forget about, or we don't have to miss things later on when we need them?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And what I really try to do is work with a team. So, often some diverse attorneys, this might not be sort of first nature to them, right? But if an individual is working with someone like you who has expertise in life transitions, then you're going to be able to bring that information and that issue to light, and then bring in a professional like myself. So one of the things that I do spend some time with is educating divorce attorneys, because again, they're focused on the law, and they're focused on winning and particular issues, but they're not really focused on the issues of aging and illness and disability, and how those can impact, first of all, the settlement itself, but also how it's going to impact the client down the road. So, it's really important it doesn't end at the divorce. There's so many things that have to happen after
Right.
that.
Right. And that implicates so many different levels of the divorce agreement. So there's future finances, there's healthcare proxies, there's trust and estates, there's the will. The only thing that I really thought about was, okay, now I have to change my will. And I redid my will as soon as I could after my divorce was final, and changed beneficiaries on my life insurance policies. But what other things should clients be thinking of, especially when they're dealing with what we now are calling gray divorce?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're dealing with really the elder law piece, we're dealing with gray divorce, and there is no special needs issues or any immediate issues of care, right? Neither partner needs care right now. Then the estate planning documents are absolutely the first thing that need to be focused on in the beneficiary designations. And you're ahead of a lot of clients that I see that never get around to making those changes. And that can, be really troubling and can cause a lot of headaches and costs. But once you get through with dealing with the immediate estate planning documents, then you really have to step back and think about, okay, what happens now as I'm aging? I now have to sort of think about my long-term care plan differently. So, I might have been thinking that I would, my spouse would help provide care for me, would, at least be a support there in the home. Now that's no longer the case. If you have children, they're going to be involved. But if there are no children, or if the children are, living far away or whatever, then you really do have to do a full long-term care plan and think about, practical issues. What happens if I have a fall? Who's going to know? Who's going to, be there? Who's going to take me to the doctor? All of these things. So often I will work with families from little practical things all the way up to thinking about consideration of working with a care manager or other professionals who might be able to really provide that support that you might have had in the past through a spouse.
Right. And that's part of the emotional upheaval, is that when people start to recognize that they may be alone and this wasn't their plan, they can take a lot of different tracks, and one of them can be denial. I just don't want to think about it. I just don't want to deal with it. I just am going to go on as if nothing's different, or I don't have to take care of it. It will solve itself. It will self-correct.
Right.
To quote Norm from Cheers. And if you know Cheers, you'll know what I'm talking about. But what what can we do, as divorce support providers to help our clients sort of look at the bigger picture without as much fear?
Yeah, I think that the key message for our clients is that planning is very empowering. And, a lot of people put off planning. I mean, even outside of this situation, just estate planning, people do tend to put that off. But we find that when people do that, they actually end up being much more vulnerable. So they're less likely to have their wishes followed. They're less likely to, have somebody that they trust who provides them. They're less likely to be able to stay at home. If you want to stay at home for the rest of your life and have, all of the care that you might need provided in your home by caregivers that you've chosen, that you trust, putting together a team that you trust, that all requires planning, just like anything else, So, we spend so much time, we plan our vacations, we plan, a million things, but we never really plan for long-term care. So I think that if we turn it around and, reframe it as really a gift to yourself and to your family, so that they know what the plan is and they can, participate as appropriately. And then also that it is a way to make sure that our wishes are going to be followed and that we're going to have the kind of life that we want to have in the future. It's just that you have to set yourself up for it, just like with your career, anything else. If we want it to go a certain way, we have to do the hard work ahead of time and plan.
Right. So it may be for many clients and many people going through divorce that this is the first time they're thinking about that long-term plan, which is why we called this show Planning for Your Third Act. So, I heard the phrase third act in a Jane Fonda TED Talk, where she talked about actually planning for your fifth act, how we have all these different times in our lives. No one thought people would live as long as we live. And all of these different moments require different energy and different planning. And it's hard, I think, for my clients to think about planning for retirement if they're just planning for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're struggling to plan for tomorrow. So what you said earlier about thinking of the planning as giving yourself a gift is such a lovely way to frame it, that you're actually reducing your stress on the back end by planning for it on the front end. And
Right.
That's really powerful. And would this be something that I would invite my clients to put into the marital settlement agreement, or would it be something after? What do you think?
No, most of what we're talking about would be after. The places that I do get involved with the actual settlement agreement language is where there are current healthcare issues that need to be addressed in terms of, providing for care, providing for alimony or changes in alimony, or if we're talking about a child with a special need, making sure, often an adult child, right, could be 30, 40 years old, but we're still looking at the issues of how are we supporting that person. So, that kind of thing has to go into an agreement. And I'll often consult with divorce attorneys on what needs to be incorporated. But in terms of what we're talking about, which is really, planning for your own future now that you are kind of going solo, that is a situation where that's going to be really afterwards. It's not going to be part of the agreement.
So essentially, we are talking about your next chapter, right? After your divorce, you have the opportunity, you get to make these plans. It's not, I tell my clients very often, if we can stop viewing this as, oh my gosh, this is what I have to do. oh my, this is so much. But if we look at it as an opportunity, I get to make plans.
Mhm.
And maybe I'm 50 now, but I get to make plans for when I'm 65 or 70 or 75 or 80. So we can look long term and actually see our future. This is really a great opportunity to say, I have so much life in front of me, and let's plan for all the life that's in front of me. So it's
100%.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So tell me more. Um, what about when a house, let's say, has already been outfitted for special needs for one of the members, and the house may be the only asset that may need to be sold? How do we work with the family during the divorce to figure out what do we do about this asset?
Hmm. Interesting question. I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into that in terms of working with the financial advisor and, both sides getting in financial advice about what's going to happen. Can that be replaced easily? Are there going to be funds to be able to do that? Are we going to be able to recover what we've put into the property in terms of
Yeah.
expenses? So I think that a lot can go into that. Something that I mentioned before is working with a care manager. So
Mhm.
these are social workers or nurses who help people think about their long-term care needs. And someone like that might be really valuable when you're looking at the issue that you raised with regard to the house. So,
Yeah.
what are the needs of this individual? What are their needs now? How are their needs going to progress? And if we're not going to be able to stay in the home, how are we going to be able to replicate
Right.
those accommodations that have been made and find something that's still going to allow the individual to remain in their home, maybe a new home, but remain in their home and have the life that they want.
That's a great suggestion, the care manager. Okay, and on that note, we will take a short break and we'll be back with Shana Siegel. And we're back with Shana Siegel, elder care lawyer. Shana, sometimes one partner's need for long-term care impacts other considerations in the divorce negotiations. And what do people need to understand about this in regard to these issues during the negotiation process?
So, unfortunately, because of the way our long-term care system functions in our country, we often see where a couple is facing long-term care, and there's a real concern about impoverishment of both members, and that the only way to provide for the care needs of the individual who needs long-term care at this point is to consider divorce. So unfortunately, I see people who they weren't otherwise necessarily considering divorce, but they're looking to divorce to resolve this issue. In that situation, there's a lot of very specific things that we will work through in terms of the attorneys representing both sides, because even though it's often kind of amicable, of course you still have to have attorneys on both sides. And we will talk through, make sure everyone understands public benefits, how to structure the transaction, the settlement in such a way that both sides are really protected, right? Because we don't know how long it's going to be before the individual needs a certain level of care, when they might be Medicaid eligible, how much money they're going to need necessarily. I mean, obviously, if they're already needing care, then we have a good sense, but, and so we try to work out a situation that is going to be fair to both sides, but is also then, if the state through the Medicaid agency is going to be looking at it, that they see it as, a fair and equitable, distribution. So
what you're saying is that sometimes it's more financially beneficial and will get the spouses better resources for their long-term care if they divorce. So they're divorcing not because of irreconcilable differences, but for financial reasons. Is that what we're talking about?
Unfortunately, that is correct. Yes. Yeah. I mean, sometimes the issues are intertwined, right? So I had a situation where there was, this was a second marriage, had not been married that long, and one spouse became very ill, and the other spouse just really was like, this isn't what I signed up for, and I can't do this. And so it was a situation where they both wanted to be divorced, but the financial issues were a major, piece of the puzzle. But as you mentioned, I do have other situations where the only reason the divorce is happening is because of the financial implications. And it's really to protect the healthy spouse and be able to make sure that they can continue on living, because, I have couples who come to me and, the person who needs long-term care is 50, 50, 60. And so we're talking about a really long time to be, to not have the resources that you previously would have had it. So, so we can structure an arrangement which will not harm the spouse who's going to be applying for public benefits ultimately to pay for their long-term care, but is going to allow more assets to be retained for the healthy spouse, as well as ultimately for the children, if there are. I mean, it's often as much about making sure that the children and grandchildren are provided for as it is just the spouse.
That's so important, because people are always thinking about their legacy, and they're thinking about their kids and their grandkids, and they don't want to feel like they're responsible for the financial ruin of the rest of their family.
Yeah.
And that's one of the struggles that people go through in divorce, is this fear, this money fear. And how will I be able to manage in a new financial situation? So you make a great point that here it's not necessarily irrevocable differences, but it is health challenges that can't be changed and need to be reckoned with in a way that is legal and is rational and makes sense of everything that's available.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's where you come in.
Absolutely. And, again, I can consult with someone like yourself, hopefully that, somebody is coming and speaking with you about that, because there are times that people will think, oh my goodness, my husband just got this diagnosis, we have to get divorced. And that may not be the only solution. And of course, if that is not the only solution, then, we don't want to do that if we don't have to. So, we can really work through and see if we can find other creative solutions that may allow us to avoid that. If it's not the primary goal. Again, as I said, sometimes, the two issues are intertwined.
Right. But what you said that really resonated this time was this idea of creativity, like being creative and curious. What's really out there? What's really available for us? What does it mean to creatively plan for our third act? So often when clients are in the midst of the divorce, they can't see anything in the future, right? They see this swirling chaos of black hole and, flying tornado vehicles, whatever it is. I'm thinking of the movie Twister, right?
Right,
Like
right.
that's what it feels like. And really what we need to do as divorce professionals is quiet that down,
Yeah.
slow it down. Let's take a breath. Let's see what's really going on here so that we can help you plan, so that you can take those steps that will carefully, mindfully, intentionally take you to where you need to go and your family too.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why your services are so invaluable because, unfortunately, that's not what divorce attorneys are typically doing, right? I mean, and whether it's just because they don't have the time to devote to it, or because, frankly, sometimes that's not in their best interest. It's not where they're sort of focusing. So it's having somebody have you to be able to say, okay, let's step back.
Yeah.
That's priceless.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. I believe so. So thank you for recognizing that. I believe that most divorce attorneys are trying to do the best for their clients, but it's very easy to get caught up in the whirlwind. When that energy is pulling you, it's a centrifugal force that you go with. And so you don't take the time to stop and step out of that cycle.
Exactly.
And that's what it means to plan. So if you've planned for it, then there's like a stop button, right? It's like, okay, this is my stop. I'm getting off on this floor. And that's the power of what it means to plan. And, no matter what your age, you can plan for getting older. None of us want to believe it's going to happen, but if we're lucky, it happens, right? If we're lucky, we're going to get older.
Absolutely.
And that's, again, as I do for my clients, reframing reality so that we can see the benefits of what's happening in our future, as opposed to only the obstacles and the negatives.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it's going to happen one way or another, right? We can't stop that clock, right?
Right.
So as we move forward, it's really just a matter of preparing for it and thinking about those things and then having plans in place or not. And, I can tell you that, again, this idea of a gift, that it really, it doesn't just make your life harder. It makes everybody's around you, whether that's children or, nieces, nephews, good friends, whoever is involved in your, sort of chosen family. All of them need the guidance from you as to what you want, because they don't want to be making those decisions without that guidance. They don't want to be the one who, ends up having to, place you or make a healthcare decision because you didn't think ahead about it, So it's just so important to do what you can to plan for it. And then, then you're ready.
Yeah. So what else do you think our audience needs to know about planning for their third act?
Well, I think a lot of people don't really understand long-term care and what it entails. I don't think they understand what is out there in terms of options for care and for residential options. And I don't think that they understand what the costs of those are. So a little bit of education goes a really long way. I was working with clients recently, and they had, this was adult children of the older adult. The older adult had some cognitive impairment issues. And I met with them and they said, oh, we have paid for care for dad in his home. And now we don't have, we've gone through all of his money, and now we have to apply for public benefits. And I said, okay, but now you're going to try to place him in a facility. And they said, yes, we'll apply for Medicaid. And I was like, you can't get into a good facility in most places, certainly here in New Jersey, if you don't have private payment left. You have to be able to private pay for a number of years before you can convert over to Medicaid. So, that was just a lack of information. So I think really, again, as part of the plan, getting the information about, what kind of things are out there. There's wonderful continuing care communities where you're in independent living and it's basically just an apartment, a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, no different from, an apartment you might have, somewhere else, but that then offers all kinds of services there, social activities and recreational options and all kinds of things, but then also care. Your doctor's office is right there in the facility. Just all of the alleviating the transportation issues that can often become, very isolating later in life.
Mm-hmm.
So, understanding what residential and care options are available can then help you to plan to be able to know, okay, what, that's really what I want, or somebody else may say, no, I want to be in my home, so understanding you can't make a choice in the absence of knowledge.
Right. And I think that is pretty much the theme in my work too, is that we need to help our clients become empowered with knowledge. They need to educate themselves up, and they need to know that they're allowed to learn new information, even if they don't feel like learning it. Like, they get to learn about this stuff because it's important for them to know. So if they need to learn about how to create their first will, they never wrote a will before, then that's what they need to do first. And if they need to step into the next phase of thinking about, okay, I'm healthy now, maybe this is the time I need to start thinking about long-term care and just what it takes to live in long-term care in New Jersey. Maybe now is the time for me to get the information when it's not a crisis.
Absolutely.
And maybe reaching out to an elder care attorney now to start that process while I'm doing all this other planning,
Right.
is actually a thing that we should put on our list, like a checkoff. Elder care planning for me, not just for my parents and not just for older people in my life, but one day I'm going to be an older person too. So let's figure it out for me too.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and it is kind of an exciting time. I mean, there's a lot of options out there. It's not just home or nursing home. There's a lot of really great options out there. And there's also a lot of great options for paying for care. It's not the same old, long-term care policy that is so expensive and it goes up every year and it's use it or lose it. There's been a lot of innovation in the industry that, there are ways to pay for care that are not going to bankrupt you. So understanding that, and obviously people, our age, are going to be able to do that much easier than someone who is looking to do that at age 85, right?
Right.
So, so it really does make a lot of sense to make this a part of your planning process as you're moving into that third act.
So I love that. And I love that the idea that it's more and much bigger than what we expect. The go bankrupt and then you can get care is not necessarily the only way. It's huge. That's a huge piece of information that people don't necessarily have. And you've been such an incredible resource. So tell us, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Absolutely. So I am with Norris McLaughlin, and I think my firm website is there, and my email address is ssiegel@norris-law.com.
Great, because we are on video, but we also are on podcast. So I want people to know how they can reach you. Siegel, Siegel @Norris law.com and it's www.norrismclaughlin.com. So thank you so much for being a guest. And thank you, my audience. You are watching Dishing on Divorce Next Chapter with Lisa Lisser. You can reach me at lisa@lzlcoaching.com, and you can find me at lzlcoaching.com. See you next week.